Hey everybody, Kyle with Bolton e-bikes here. Sun is in my eyes, which is good because that means the sun's out and I can do another review on a bike. So the last one I did was on the Rad Rover, which is not a bike that I offer or sell. You can only get those from Rad Power. But this, on the other hand, is an all-wheel drive electric fat bike. That's right, all-wheel drive. You have two motors, count them, 1, 2. A 250 watt motor in the front and a 350 watt motor in the back. So why would you need an all-wheel drive fat bike? Truthfully, probably no one actually needs one, but there are a few advantages and a few kind of unique things it can do that no other bike can. Now, the first thing I should point out is that it's all-wheel drive, but it's optional as to which motor you actually use. So you've got a 3-position switch right here on the handlebars. If you're to the left, that's the rear motor. To the right is the front motor, and in the middle is both. So let's say you're gonna go for a really long ride, you wanna conserve power, and you're gonna be on relatively flat ground, or you wanna pedal a lot with the motor. Well, you could run the front 250 watt motor and use the different levels of assist, and with that you could really maximize your range because basically you're running this thing like a 250 watt bike. That means your 48 volt battery, and even though it's a slightly smaller capacity than some other bikes, it's going to get you more range. Now let's say you want a little bit more power, then you turn on just the 350 watt rear hub motor and you've got a different power level. Once again, you have some adjustment with the levels of assist with the rear motor. And then if you get to a hill or some steep terrain and you need even more power, you turn on both motors, giving you 600 watts. But when I say 600 watts, it's a little bit different. These motors are relatively small, so you'll notice they're smaller than, say, a Bafang 350 watt hub motor, at least from the outside case perspective. But because you've got the two motors, I think there's noticeably more torque than a lot of even 750 watt bikes you see on the market. So even though it's 600 watts, you've got two motors, more torque than normal, so this thing climbs hills really well. Now, because this isn't a review per se, and I do sell the bikes, I'm not gonna go through the grading scale that I do on bikes that I don't sell, because I don't think that would be fair or that I could be unbiased. I think you can set your own things. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the bike. There's a helicopter in the back making a lot of racket. Hopefully I don't pick up only helicopter sound and you can hear what I'm saying. So we've got price point $16.99, the two motors, you got a 48 volt battery, and it's about a 10 amp hour capacity, so a little bit less than some of the other bikes that I offer from some competitors. So I wish it was a little bit bigger, but at the same time you've got a lot of flexibility on how to use that power. So I'm personally okay with that, but just be aware of that. As far as options go, the rack comes standard on the bike, and the same goes with the front and rear fenders, and as well, it has this nice suspension seat post. So you do get a few extras on this bike that just come standard, which I really like that about it. It does come with some kind of generic mechanical disc brakes. So nothing too fancy there. This would be a good candidate for those Juintech hydraulic brakes if you wanted more braking power. And as far as unboxing this thing, very simple. Basically, you're putting on the front wheel. The only difference is you're bolting on that front wheel because you've got a front hub motor, and you do have to plug in this connector right here. But nothing complicated at all. I already talked about that 3-position switch. Of course, the GoPro Hero 7 does not come with it. Now here's the display, a bit more basic than what you typically see on an e-bike. I think, or at least I have a theory as to why the manufacturer used something simpler on this all-wheel drive bike. So the reason, at least this is my guess, I haven't confirmed this with them. So normally with a 2-wheel drive setup, you can kind of have anything from 2 totally separate systems, say 2 batteries, 2 motor controllers, 2 throttles, everything, down to kind of a hybrid system, let's say you've got one throttle that's wired into both controllers and you have one main battery, but you still have two motor controllers that are running two separate motors. There's kind of a different range of ways to go about it. Now, one of the things that gets a little bit tricky is the voltage readings and the watt readings, because let's say you're using one battery, yeah, your voltage is consistent, but what about your watts? Normally these are drawing a certain amount of power from each motor, and you need a screen for each motor. It's just the way that they're designed. So they're not normally measuring the controller anyway, the wattage that's being drawn from the battery, they're measuring the wattage going to the motor. So I think the reason they use the simpler display that does not show wattage or anything on it is because it'd be giving you a false reading, because it'd probably be only connected to one of the motors. And the only good way around that would be to have a second screen, which gets confusing. Maybe somebody will have a all-wheel drive setup that kind of integrates things and is designed for that, but that's my guess. So it is what it is. You've got a power button right here, and you have some LED lights, and you've got either kilometers or miles per hour on your screen there. You've got a plus and a minus button here, so you've got 3 levels of assist, but it's really more like 9 levels of assist, because combined with that 3-position switch over here, you can have a really wide combination of power settings, from 250 watts, 1, 2, 3 settings, 350 watts out of the back wheel, 1, 2, 3 settings, and 600 watts out of both motors, once again with 1, 2, 3 settings. Now this switch can be chained to any time. You can be riding along middle of a trail, doesn't matter. You can swap that and immediately the different motors kick on, and it doesn't seem to hurt anything or cause any trouble whatsoever. You do have a trigger shifter over here, which is nice, and because you have this switch here and a trigger shifter here, it would be really awkward to have a throttle here. So the throttle is on the left side, so something a little bit different from a lot of bikes. You've got a half twist throttle on the left. Don't see that very often. Usually if the throttle's on the left, it's a thumb throttle. Now, of course, the thing everybody really wants to know is, does the all-wheel drive system actually work? Does it even make sense, or is it just more of a gimmick? So the only way to find that out for sure is to go for a ride. And hitting the trail, plenty of power, but we're still going downhill. It's the uphill where this is gonna get interesting. For having 2 motors, you would think that this bike would feel kind of heavy and clunky. So this is my first real trail ride with it, and I would say it is not heavy or clunky at all. It actually feels really light and maneuverable. So this isn't kind of the typical bike I would take down a trail and kind of beat it up, but it feels nimble. I'm liking it. But we're not going up yet, we're still going down. Once again, no suspension fork in the front, so do have to be a little careful on some of those bigger bumps. Kind of use your arms. This is a good trail bike. It's not the full suspension mountain bike that I've got by any means. Now we got some mud. Yeah, I got fenders on, I don't need to slow down. Now, let's see if these motors can actually climb. Okay, so I rode all the way down on the road and down the hill. I either had the motor off or I just had the front 250 watt motor on. So I believe this one, the way it's set up, the pedal assist, if it's in a 1, then it kind of limits the throttle to a 1. If you turn the pedal assist to 2, then you get a little bit more throttle. So here is the front 250 watt motor on a level 1 with the throttle, and it's slight grade uphill. So this is the least amount of power that the bike has. Let's see what it does in 3, 2, 1. And it's struggling a little bit to get going. Okay. So yeah, in a level 1, you definitely have to help it. So this is me pedaling with the front 250 watt motor. Shift down one more gear, up a slight hill. So now I'm going to switch immediately to the rear motor, and we'll see if we notice a difference. Okay, on the rear motor, I felt a little bit of power, but the increase in speed was very slight. Now again, I'm only on the pedal assist 1, so if I turn it up to a 2, I get a little, I'm not using the throttle at the moment, a little more power. Not noticing any difference between pedal assist and twisting the throttle, so I think it limits it the same. Let's turn it to a 3. Oh yeah, so there's a pretty substantial boost between a level 2 and a 3 on that rear motor. So flat ground, a little bit of mud. So this is a good uphill pace. We're picking up some speed now. So as soon as you hit a flat stretch, that 350 motor wants to start picking up. So now that we're getting into a steeper section, how does the dual motor work? Okay, so throttle only on the rear motor, 350 watts, not gonna make it up this hill without me. So I'm gonna have to pedal a little bit. So let's switch it to both and see what happens right now. Whoa, okay. That's both motors. This is a very strange feeling because I've got one motor in the back and then I've got the front motor. It's not anything terrible, but I've got some loose, muddy stuff. You really feel that front motor. It's almost like the rear motor's giving you most of the power, and then the front motor, it's like you're just pointing it, saying, that's where I want to go. And you just point the wheel that way, and you feel it pulling you through the turns. But it's not overpowering. I didn't feel it slip at all. I don't know if you guys could tell when watching, but this is most definitely uphill. I kind of wish I knew how much power it was drawing when using both. I know it should be 600 watts. I don't know if that's accurate. Oh, this is really steep. Okay. All right, so I wasn't prepared for that. This is the steepest section of the trail. Some of the bikes I have cannot make it up this. The 1,000-watt mid-drive bikes can all make it up this hill, no problem whatsoever. On motor power alone, even with both turned on, this bike wouldn't make it up this particular hill. But I think I need to get like a side view so you can get a perspective of how steep this is. I don't know how well that shows up in camera, but this is not a small hill by any means. When I was riding my regular mountain bike, not an electric bike, I had a really hard time ever making it up this hill, just fighting for traction and everything else. So I think if I picked up some more speed, I might be able to make it up that one. Whew. But that'd be a tough one. Okay, we're gonna go the other direction. Whew. So, lots of torque. We were really going fast up kind of the medium grade. I might have to go take some measurements and see what those actually are, but absolute steepest hills you're gonna find, a mid-drive will outrun this bike. Root. Oh yeah, that's nice having front tire grab some traction when you're leaning forward or standing up on the pedals like this. You're not worried about that back wheel slipping. Front's just taking you right along. So the bike's pretty quick. Rolling hills, I would say it's decently fast. The other thing I think I should mention is the size. So I'm 5'10". The bike is very comfortable, very maneuverable. It's larger than my 24-inch 750 watt fat bike for sure, but this bike is a little bit smaller than my 1,000 watt mid-drive fat bikes or some of the other 26-inch fat tire bikes I've sold in the past. So if you are looking for, let's say you've gone for a ride on a Rad Rover or a Saunders, and you can get on it, you can ride it, but it's not quite comfortable, and you want something smaller, this one is just a hair shorter. I think the standover height's a little shorter, so it's a little more comfortable as far as that goes. Still a 26-inch bike though. If you're 5 foot tall, I think you'd be better on a smaller bike. So this is a pretty steep hill on road, no trouble whatsoever. I knew that one steep section on the trail was going to be a tough one, and not many bikes can make it up. Hill I have on a trail really close by the shop. If you can make it up that, you're going to make it up anything. The right rider, or just me giving it another shot, I could probably make it up, but it'd be a challenge. Brakes felt good, even though they're just a generic Chinese caliper of some sort. Stopping power felt really good down those hills, so I'm pretty pleased. I would say if you're on the fence when you buy one of these about the brakes, I would probably leave them alone and try them first before you change anything, because you might be perfectly happy with them. That was fun. I like riding new bikes all the time. Who wouldn't? Okay, so I am back to the shop. Now I've had a chance to actually ride this bike. What are my real impressions? For me personally, I do have a 1,000 watt mid-drive on my bike that I ride regularly, so I'm used to a little bit more torque going up the steepest of hills, but not much. So if you are most concerned about really steep hills, a mid-drive will perform a little bit better. If you're comparing this bike to a 500 or 750 watt hub motor bike, then this one's going to be really good, and I would consider this in your list of options, especially if you're looking at it from this perspective of, can I, squeeze some extra range out of it? Because even though it's got two motors, it felt really light. It was nimble on the trails, and on the road, and even on the trails when they were flat or downhill or even just a real mild grade, the 250 watt motor actually worked better than I thought it would. So I wouldn't be surprised if that front motor is pulling more than 250 watts. That's what it's rated as. I don't have a screen that can tell me what the wattage is, but I would not be surprised if it's a little more. And the 350 watt motor, just a slight bump in power, not a big difference between the two, but you get the advantage of having the motor in the rear wheel, which is better for traction going up slight grades. So works great all around. It's kind of like you have the 350 watt Saunders fat bikes. This can do everything those can, and then with the flick of a switch, you can turn it into something close to their 750 watt models. So that's pretty cool. I like that about it. Once again, I like the fact that it comes with the rear rack and the fenders. It's not an extra cost. That's a really noisy airplane. But that was cool. I don't know what that was. It's got a nice Shimano trigger shifter. Let's undo the camera here. Hold on. It's tight on there. Didn't want it to come off. Okay, let's give you a brief overview of the bike again. 4-inch wide Kenda tires, 350 watt and 250 watt motors, fenders, which are metal, not plastic. Those come standard. So does the rear rack. I have a little camera tripod sitting on there. You've got a suspension seat post right here, which between the fat tires and the suspension seat post, Actually, I found the bike very comfortable. I was worried it was going to be a bit stiff. I didn't feel that way at all, even on the rocky sections of the trail. So who's really going to want this bike? There's that noisy airplane, if you can see that. I think a lot of people have asked me about this bike for hunting, and I think it would be ideal for that, because let's say you're getting into some off-road terrain and you need that extra traction. You can flick on that front motor and you have it. Let's say you want to conserve power to get out onto a trail, and then you've got a trailer behind it with some gear, or you get something when you go out hunting. You've got enough torque that you can haul it back. So I really think this would work well for that. I'm only mentioning that because I've had a lot of people already ask me about it. So yes, I think this would make a good hunting bike. I think you'd be very happy with it. Now, as far as the geometry goes, the bars are relatively flat. It's a little bit smaller than some of the other 26-inch bikes, so I found it comfortable. I do like my bars to sit a little bit closer. So if you want a really upright feeling, you might want to get a taller stem. Personally, I find it comfortable, but I grew up mountain biking and I like a little bit more aggressive stance on any bikes that I ride. You've got a pretty basic Shimano Altus group set on there. Nothing fancy as far as the gearing, but once again, you got the two motors, you can flip between them, and you have a really wide range of power. Probably the only thing I don't have on this bike that I should have mentioned or put on here before I took it for a test ride, it does come with a front headlight. So the wires right there, they do run off the battery. The tail light is a battery operated one. It does have a mount for something on the very rear rack portion, but the tail light is just a small battery operated one. But hey, it comes with lights, fenders, the rack. That's all I gotta say. I'm impressed. I'm happy with it. So if you want an all-wheel drive bike, or if you were even just considering it, I don't know where else you can get one, but I love it. If I was gonna keep one for myself, the way it sits right now, I cannot yet think of anything immediately that I would change. So that's my opinion. I think it's a great bike the way it is. I think you could ride this on the road, on the trails. It actually made a better trail bike than I thought. I thought it was going to feel a little clunky. It felt light and maneuverable, so very impressed. I think those that have already ordered this bike are going to be extremely happy with it. If you have any questions, make sure to comment on this video. And if you haven't already, of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like if you want to see more bike reviews, if you want to see me go take more bikes for test rides and just really get a feel for them and try and give you my best opinion on them. But once again, $16.99, available at boltonebikes.com, and they are on back order right now as of the time I'm recording this. That could change by the time the video comes out, but if it hasn't, the container is really close and getting unloaded very soon. So there should be plenty of these available. Thanks again for watching. I will be back soon.